The morning light stretched across Dover Air Force Base, coating the C-17 III in a pale orange hue. The massive aircraft stood like a sleeping beast on the tarmac, silent, steady, waiting for orders. Inside the cockpit, Captain Trent ran her pre-flight checklist, her fingers moving with practiced precision. Every switch, every gauge, every flicker of light, familiar, reliable. Wasn't one for small talk. She believed in the rhythm of procedure, the comfort of repetition. To her, the sky was not a place for drama. It was where control mattered most. She had flown dozens of missions like this, cargo runs, long hours, tight fuel calculations, and quiet flights where the radio chatter faded into white noise. Her co-pilot, Captain Robert Bob, was her opposite, loud, quick with jokes, and proud of his gray-streaked hair that marked him as a veteran of too many deployments. "You ever get tired of flying boxes, Trent?" he teased as he sipped burnt coffee from a paper cup. "Boxes don't argue, Bob," she replied, her eyes fixed on the instrument panel. He chuckled. "Yeah, but they don't thank you either." Smiled faintly. She didn't fly for thanks. She flew because flying was the only thing that made sense to her, the only place where everything was logical, measurable, and under control. The mission that day seemed no different than the last, a straightforward transport from Dover, Delaware to Air Force Base, Alaska. The manifest listed essential maintenance supplies and medical equipment bound for a remote Arctic outpost. The weather forecast predicted light turbulence over the Rockies, nothing the C-17 couldn't handle. But there was something odd about the air that morning, a sharp, electric edge. The maintenance chief had mentioned unusual electromagnetic interference near Alaska the past few days. "Probably solar activity," he'd said casually, had nodded, unconcerned. She trusted her aircraft more than she trusted luck. At 600 hours, the engines roared to life. The crew secured their headsets, and his voice carried through the cockpit, firm and calm. "Tower, this is Reach 421, requesting clearance for takeoff." Reach 421 cleared to runway 22. "Winds calm. Good flying, Captain Trent." As the C-17 lifted off, felt that familiar rush, the heavy weight of steel and cargo surrendering to the invisible arms of the sky. Beneath them, the earth fell away, and the Atlantic horizon glowed with morning fire. The first 2 hours were uneventful. The crew settled into their routine, navigation checks, fuel readings, flight path confirmations. The cabin was filled with the low hum of engines and the occasional click of radio static. His eyes never left her instruments, though sometimes she glanced out at the endless blue ahead, where the air seemed to stretch into eternity. Then a voice crackled through the intercom, one of the loadmasters in the rear. "Captain, we've got some strange readings on the cargo sensors, getting intermittent loss of data from Bay 2. Frowned, probably a faulty connector. Have Sergeant run diagnostics." "Copy that." She logged the note but didn't think much of it. Still, something unsettled her, a feeling she couldn't name. The skis over the northern route were often unpredictable, and she'd learned to trust instincts as much as instruments. By the time they reached Montana airspace, thin streaks of gray clouds began to form, layering the horizon. Bob adjusted the radio frequency, scanning for updates. "Weather station says a low-pressure cell's moving faster than expected. Might clip us before anchorage." Nodded. "We'll keep altitude steady and monitor turbulence. No deviation yet." It was routine, or at least it should have been. She leaned back in her seat for a moment, glancing at the photo taped beside the throttle quadrant, her father in an old flight jacket, grinning beside a propeller plane. He taught her to fly when she was 16. His only rule, never underestimate the sky. For years, she'd carried those words like a compass. But today, as the clouds thickened and the navigation lights blinked faintly through the mist, those words felt heavier than usual. "Reach 421, this is NORAD control. Be advised, We're tracking minor comm disturbances over northern sectors. Nothing to worry about, just keep your secondary channels open." "Copy that, NORAD," replied. Her voice was steady, her heartbeat was. She looked out the cockpit window, the calm before the storm. The hum of the engines, the glow of the instruments, the endless expanse of gray sky ahead. She exhaled slowly, unaware that within the next few hours she'd no longer be just a cargo pilot. She would be the call sign the world remembered. The C-17 steady drone filled the cockpit, rhythmic and reassuring. Outside, the light was thinning, the bright blue skies replaced by cold, swirling clouds. The sun had disappeared behind a curtain of gray, and the airspeed indicator showed a gradual dip as the winds began to push against them. Adjusted the yoke, keeping the aircraft steady. "Crosswinds picking up," she said. "Maintain heading 290. "Copy," Bob answered, adjusting the trim. "Feels like we're flying through soup." They were halfway through Canadian airspace when the first warning light flickered. A brief orange blink on the right engine display, oil pressure low, engine 2. His eyes snapped to the screen. Engine 2 reading low pressure, confirm. Bob scanned the panel. Could be a sensor glitch, readings are bouncing. She frowned. Run diagnostics, let's not assume. The hum of the engines wavered slightly, almost imperceptibly. To anyone else, it would sounded like background noise. But it was a heartbeat skipping a beat. She'd flown long enough to recognize when a machine was whispering a warning. "Reach 421 to anchorage control," she radioed calmly. "We're experiencing minor irregularities on engine 2. Request updated weather and vector confirmation." No response. She tried again. "Anchorage control, this is reach 421, radio check." Static hissed back. The signal indicator flickered. Bob adjusted the frequency. "Weird, I'm not getting tower response on any band." "Switch to secondary comms," ordered. Still nothing, only crackling silence. The loadmaster's voice came through faintly from the back. "Captain, cargo bay sensors are down again, getting interference, and the navigation lights just flickered." His jaw tightened. "Secure all loose equipment and standby." She glanced at Bob. "Run full electrical diagnostic. I want to know if this is environmental or internal." He nodded, his tone shifting from casual to serious. "Copy that." Within minutes, the weather outside worsened. The clouds thickened into a dark, churning mass. Sheets of sleet lashed against the windshield, and the plane began to rattle under the turbulence. "Storm front wasn't supposed to hit until anchorage," Bob muttered. Checked the radar, it was blank. The screen, usually alive with pulsing data, now displayed static and ghost signals. Then the autopilot disengaged with a sharp click. "Manual control," said, gripping the yoke firmly. "We're losing navigation input." Bob swore under his breath. "INS is dead, GPS not responding either." The flight deck was suddenly alive with flashing lights and alarm tones. The left screen went black, followed by the right. The entire navigation suite flickered once, then rebooted with corrupted data. For a split second, saw their altitude reading drop by 2,000 feet, then jump back up again. It wasn't real, but the confusion was deadly. "Stabilize at flight level 250, she commanded. "Trying," Bob said. His hands were tight on the controls, fighting the wind shear. The C-17 trembled like a leaf caught in a storm. The cargo hold began to creak under stress, metal groaning. From the rear, the crew shouted over the intercom, "Pressure's dropping, cabin temperatures falling fast." His breath quickened. "Seal the compartment, everyone buckle down." A violent jolt threw the aircraft sideways. Bob's coffee cup smashed against the floor, splattering across the console. The warning alarm screamed, "Engine 2 failure, fuel flow critical." Straining took over. "Cut fuel line to engine 2, rebalance thrust to 1 and 3. "Copy," Bob barked. His fingers moved fast over the switches. The engine roar lowered to a heavy, uneven growl. Anchorage control, reach 421 declaring emergency. We have engine failure, loss of nav systems, and partial electrical failure. Request immediate assistance. Only static answered. The cockpit lights dimmed, then flickered. The world outside turned white. A blinding flash of lightning struck somewhere nearby, shaking the aircraft like a toy. The crew was thrown forward as the plane dipped sharply, alarms howling. Altitude shouted. Losing altitude fast, Bob called out, straining against the controls. Grab the yoke, pulling with all her strength. Stabilize, pull her up now. The altimeter spun down, 24,000, 22,000, 20,000 feet. The wind screamed past the fuselage like a banshee. The storm wasn't just turbulence, it was chaos. Then came a low, guttural cough from the remaining engines. The vibration worsened, panels rattling loose. His headset crackled suddenly, faint, fragmented words breaking through the static. Reach 421 signal weak, say again. Anchorage, this is Captain Trent. We're declaring Mayday. Repeat, Mayday. 2 engines compromised, systems failure, we are. The rest of her transmission vanished in noise. Bob looked at her, fear in his eyes for the first time. Do we turn back? He shouted. Shook her head. We can't, too far, too heavy. We head north, find clear sky. Without comms. Without anything, she said, gripping the controls. We're not dying in a storm. Lightning flashed again, illuminating her face, calm, determined, utterly in command. Below them, the dark ocean stretched endlessly, swallowing the horizon. Above, the storm raged, unrelenting. Inside that steel bird cut off from the world, Captain Trent tightened her harness, her pulse steady. The mission was no longer about cargo. It was about survival. The storm seemed endless, a gray wall of rain and ice stretching across the horizon. Inside the cockpit, the crew's movements were precise but tense. Hands never left the yoke, fingers moving like a concert pianist, each adjustment critical to keep the C-17 level. Outside, wind gusts threw the massive aircraft around like a toy, and sheets of icy sleet slammed against the windshield. Visibility was practically zero. Bob glanced at the instruments, panic flickering in his eyes. We're drifting again. Altitude is down 1,000 feet. Compensate with thrust on engines 1 and 3. Keep her level, barked. Her voice was steady, calm, a mask over the adrenaline surging through her veins. The cockpit lights flickered, and another warning screeched, hydraulic system pressure low. Hydraulics, Bob's voice cracked. We're losing control surfaces. Swallowed the lump in her throat. She had trained for emergencies, yes, but nothing like this. A perfect storm of electrical failures, engine issues, and rapidly deteriorating weather. One wrong move and they'd be a falling brick into the Pacific. The intercom crackled faintly, almost unintelligible. Reach 421 message. Leaned forward, straining to catch the fragmented words. She tried every frequency, every emergency channel, but all that answered was static. NORAD, Anchorage Control, anyone. Silence. Her mind raced. They were alone, truly isolated. In a military career spanning over a decade, had flown dangerous missions, short runways, hostile zones, Arctic storms. But this felt different. Out here, over open ocean and high northern territories, there was no backup, no immediate rescue. It was just the C-17 and her crew. The storm's roar was deafening, and the cargo hold groaned as the heavy supplies shifted with every tilt. His voice cracked into the intercom, firm and authoritative. Secure all equipment. Everyone strap in. We're going to ride this out. From the rear, the loadmaster's voice trembled. Captain, we're losing cabin pressure. His eyes flicked to the gauge. It was dropping fast. Oxygen masks deployed automatically, and the crew pulled them over their faces. The cold and lack of air added another layer of stress. Her own mask felt tight against her face, but she ignored it, focusing entirely on the aircraft. Minutes felt like hours. The altimeter spun in dizzying motion. 24002250021000 fought to maintain control. Her hands ached, her arms burning from constant corrections. The autopilot was offline, the navigational systems dead, the radio silent. They were invisible to the world below. Then came a flicker of hope. In her mind, she knew the only way to get attention, the only chance to alert anyone capable of helping, was to use her old call sign. A code few remembered, but one that could pierce through the chaos if the right people heard it. Falcon 29, she whispered under her breath, a name that had once belonged to her in advanced training exercises, a call sign that meant precision, reliability, and someone who could always get the job done. She keyed the emergency frequency and broadcast. Falcon 29 declaring Mayday. This is Captain Trent aboard Reach 421. Systems failing. 2 engines compromised. Electrical failure. Request immediate assistance. Her voice carried over the static, slicing through the roar of the storm. She repeated it, each transmission desperate but precise. For a long, heart-stopping moment, there was nothing. Then a faint voice crackled back, distorted, almost imperceptible but alive. Falcon 29 confirm location. Identify yourself. His hands trembled slightly on the yoke. This is Captain Trent. Coordinates: latitude 6145, longitude -149.2. Repeat, we are in critical emergency. The voice came again, clearer this time. It was military, controlled, authoritative, the tone that could only come from highly trained pilots. Somewhere in the sky they had heard her, and they were responding. Hope sparked in the cockpit. The crew exchanged glances, their fear mingling with disbelief, took a deep breath. They weren't alone anymore. Maybe, just maybe, they could survive this storm. But the storm was not finished. The winds grew fiercer. Ice began to coat the wings, and the aircraft's instruments continued their erratic dance. His grip on the yoke was iron-tight. Every decision, every small movement would be the difference between life and death. For the first time that day, she felt a spark of determination, not just to survive, but to take control. If anyone was going to get her crew out of this alive, it would be her. The storm raged, the C-17 groaned, but Falcon 29 was no longer silent in the void. Someone had heard her call, and they were coming. Far below the storm, deep inside a bunker in Colorado, the lights of NORAD Command Center glowed against the gray walls. Radar operators sat in front of giant screens, their faces lit by the green phosphorescent glow of moving blips. Submergency ping had reached them, a faint, irregular signal that caused a flurry of alarms to flash across the main display. Unidentified aircraft in northern sector, altitude dropping rapidly, called Lieutenant Parker, eyes scanning a chaotic sea of radar dots. Signal is weak but persistent. Looks like distress. Commander Sarah Monroe, a veteran of decades in air defense operations, leaned over his shoulder. "That's no ordinary flight," she said sharply. "Patch me into the nearest intercept unit. I want eyes on this immediately." On the west coast at Air Force Base in Alaska, 2 F-22 Raptors roared to life, engines igniting with thunderous power. The lead pilot, Col Hawk, felt the familiar adrenaline surge as he read the emergency dispatch. Unknown aircraft in severe distress. Location matches Northern Air Corridor, C-17, possibly. Time is critical. His wingman, Jordan Blaze, shot him a questioning glance. "You think it's one of ours?" "Not sure yet," Hawk replied, checking flight paths. Then he saw the faint signature in the radar logs. "Wait a second." A flicker of recognition hit him. Falcon 29. "Falcon 29, Blaze echoed. Hawk's voice tightened. "Yeah, that's Trent. Trained me on flight sims years ago. She's one of the best cargo pilots in the Air Force. If she's in trouble, this isn't going to be easy." Back in the storm, C-17 fought against gusts that pitched the aircraft dangerously. The fragile communications link flickered again. Her voice cracked through the static, calling, "Falcon 29 to any air support, we are losing altitude fast. Two engines failing, electrical malfunction, Mayday." From NORAD, the response was nearly instant. "Falcon 29, this is F-22 scramble. Maintain current heading. We are visual, repeat, we are visual." His hands tightened on the yoke. Relief surged, but it was tempered with fear. These F-22s were sleek, fast, and deadly, designed for combat maneuvers, not escorting a crippled cargo plane through a storm. She knew it would take precise coordination to stay alive. In the F-22 cockpit, Hawk's eyes scanned the instruments. Altitude 25,000, visibility 0. There she is, barely visible in the storm. He flicked a switch, activating external lights that cut through the gray sheets of sleet. The massive silhouette of the C-17 loomed like a ghost in the mist. Hawk's voice came through his headset, calm yet commanding. "Falcon 29, this is Hawk. I've got visual. Maintain heading 290, we'll guide you." Swallowed hard. "Copy that, Hawk. Engines failing, wing turbulence heavy. Brace for guidance." The F-22s flanked the C-17, slicing through the storm with precision. Their afterburners lit the gray sky, acting as both beacons and shields against gusts that threatened to buffet the transport. Followed their lead, adjusting her yoke to mimic their movements, trusting them completely. Back at NORAD, the screen showed multiple aircraft tracking the distressed plane. Commander Monroe's fingers drummed on the console. "This storm is unprecedented. If those F-22s can't stabilize her, we could lose both the C-17 and the pilots." His voice was steady, but the strain was audible. Cabin temperature falling rapidly, crew struggling with oxygen masks. Fuel on engine 1 low, may not hold to anchorage. Hawk's response was immediate. "Understood, we'll maintain escort. Use our lead, match altitude carefully, trust the signals, you're not alone anymore." The F-22s formed a protective corridor around the massive transport, shielding it from the worst of the wind shear. Followed every flicker of their lights, every subtle maneuver, feeling a thread of hope that had been absent moments ago. In that moment, for the first time since the storm began, she realized something profound. She wasn't just a cargo pilot anymore. She was the call sign that could rally the Air Force's most elite pilots, the anchor in a storm that others would follow. But the storm wasn't done. The engines continued to groan, instruments flickered, and the distant horizon offered no promise of calm. Every second counted, every decision could mean the difference between life and death. And above it all, Hawk's voice guided her like a lighthouse in chaos. "Falcon 29, hold steady. We've got you." Just a little further, the storm had reached a crescendo. The C-17 groaned under the assault of wind and ice, its massive frame shuddering with each violent gust. Inside the cockpit, Trent's hands were raw from gripping the yoke. Every twitch of the controls could tip the plane into a deadly roll. She monitored her instruments obsessively, noting the flickers and false readings as if they were a foreign language she had to decode. "Falcon 29, this is Hawk," came the F-22 leader's voice over the radio, steady and authoritative. "We've got you visual. Stay close, maintain your heading. You're doing fine." Swallowed the lump in her throat. She forced her voice calm. "Copy, Hawk, matching your vectors. Cabin pressure dropping fast, crew struggling with oxygen. Engines 1 and 3 at 70% thrust." Behind her, the co-pilot, Bob, was white-knuckled on the throttle. "We're barely holding level. Any more turbulence and we could lose it." Nodded but didn't reply. She was scanning every angle, every motion, every flicker of lightning illuminating the clouds. Then came a flash. The silhouette of one of the F-22s appeared through the sleet, cutting like a knife through the gray. Its sleek frame glinted faintly as the afterburner pulsed, a beacon of precision in the chaos. Hawk was not just guiding them, he was shielding them. The Raptor's speed and agility created a buffer against wind shear, their maneuvering absorbing what the C-17's massive bulk could not. Followed their movements exactly, trusting instinct and training over the instruments that were barely functional. Falcon 29, match my roll 2 degrees starboard now, Hawk instructed, voice clipped but calm. Adjusted the yoke, rolling the massive aircraft with painstaking precision. The C-17 protested with every movement, metal creaking under the strain, but it responded. Bob's hands followed, supporting her input, keeping the aircraft level with a synchronization that bordered on artistry. Cabin temperature still falling. Crew oxygen stabilizing at 40%, reported, her voice taut but controlled. Hawk's tone softened but remained firm. Good, keep it steady. Don't fight the storm, let it pass around you. Trust me, you're doing everything right. Took a deep breath, allowing herself a fraction of relief. The Raptor escort was her lifeline, and for the first time she felt that survival was within reach. She scanned the storm, noting every movement, anticipating the next gust, correcting instantly. Her old call sign, Falcon 29, felt more than just a name, it felt like a shield. Through the static, she could hear the F-22s communicating with NORAD, coordinating airspace and plotting a safe corridor to Alaska. Adjust course 2 degrees north, one of the Raptors called. Storm center moving faster than predicted, stay on the edge. Nodded and made the adjustment. The C-17 leaned, resisting, but the massive engines responded. Outside, sheets of sleet clung to the wings, adding weight, icing the flaps, testing every ounce of the aircraft's structural integrity. Minutes stretched like hours. Every flicker of lightning highlighted the delicate dance between four massive, high-performance machines. His heart pounded, but she kept her expression neutral, keeping the crew focused. Every call, every correction mattered. A single misstep could send them spiraling. Then, over the radio, came a faint, familiar crackle. Falcon 29 remained calm, guidance confirmed, visual corridor established. Allowed herself a small exhale. They had a corridor, a path through the storm created by the F-22s. It was narrow, perilous, and unforgiving, but it existed. Bob, she said quietly, this is it. Follow my lead. Eyes sharp, fingers ready. We ride this corridor, we make it through. He nodded, gripping the throttle. The loadmaster in the back gave a terse thumbs up through the bulkhead window. Even with oxygen masks and frost-coated panels, the crew's confidence was returning. They had a chance, a real chance. The storm continued its roar, lightning striking the clouds like a drum roll announcing doom, but for the first time felt the faintest spark of hope. They weren't alone anymore. They had guidance, a corridor, and most importantly, her crew believed in her. Falcon 29 was no longer just a call sign, it was a promise. Survival, precision, and unbreakable resolve. And above all, it was a signal that someone somewhere was watching over them, ready to catch them if they fell. The C-17 trembled violently as it descended through sheets of sleet, the Arctic wind gnawing at its fuselage like a predator. Inside the cockpit, Trent's knuckles were white against the yoke, her jaw tight, eyes locked on the instruments and the faint glow of the F-22s ahead. Every muscle in her body screamed, but she couldn't afford hesitation. Falcon 29, Hawk's voice came over the radio, calm but urgent. We've got you on final vector. Align with the clearing, hold altitude at 22,000 until the ice shelf appears. Watch the flaps deploy gradually. Do not. Nodded even though he couldn't see her. Copy, flaps staged, holding altitude, eyes on corridor. The wind gusted again, slamming the C-17 sideways. The aircraft's metal frame groaned in protest, cargo rattling ominously behind them. The loadmaster yelled through the intercom. Cabin temp falling to 32 degrees, oxygen levels dropping fast. I know, barked, more to herself than anyone else. She could feel the pressure building in her chest, but she blocked it out. This wasn't panic, it was precision under fire. Every correction of the yoke, every throttle adjustment was calculated. Her crew trusted her and she could not fail them. Ahead, the F-22s danced with lethal grace through the storm. Their lights cut through the gray curtain, a visual corridor guiding the massive cargo plane toward an icy strip of Alaskan terrain barely visible through the mist. Hawk's steady voice gave constant instructions, each one precise, measured. Falcon 29, 10 degrees starboard, descend 20 feet now, hold steady. Followed perfectly, coaxing the heavy aircraft like a wild stallion. The altimeter spun as the wind tried to wrestle the plane into the void below. Every second, she balanced fear with focus, control with instinct. Suddenly, the left engine shuddered violently, spewing black smoke. Stomach dropped. Engine 1, fluctuating, we might lose it. Compensate with 3, Hawk commanded. You can do this. Her hands moved instinctively, adjusting thrust, trimming rudder, banking slightly to stabilize. The aircraft trembled, but it didn't fall. Every fiber of her being screamed for caution, but she ignored the fear. Bob beside her muttered under his breath, She's insane." "Not insane," said voice steady, eyes forward. "Focused. Keep your eyes on the path, Bob, trust me." Below, the ice shelf loomed, jagged and treacherous, barely wide enough for a C-17 to land safely. Gusts of wind tore across it, throwing snow and ice into the air, forming temporary walls that obscured the surface. She could see nothing clearly except the ghostly shapes of the F-22s, guiding her like angels through the storm. "Hold your line," Hawk's voice commanded. "Final approach, Falcon 29. Timing is critical. Glide slope shallow, do not overcompensate." His fingers moved like lightning. Every adjustment was minute, precise, a tilt here, a nudge there. The plane trembled under her touch, every creak of metal a reminder of how close disaster lurked. The runway, or rather the ice strip, grew beneath them. Visibility was nearly zero, but she trusted the F-22s, the instruments that still worked, and her instincts honed from thousands of hours of flying. Flaps fully deployed, gear down, touchdown in 20 seconds. Her heart raced, adrenaline surging. She felt the first contact as the wheels hit the icy surface, a bone-jarring, teeth-rattling jolt. The massive plane shuddered violently but remained upright. She kept the yoke steady, managing the slide across the slick surface. "Brake slowly, maintain rudder alignment," Hawk shouted. Obeyed, gradually bleeding speed, coaxing the C-17 to a trembling stop. The engines roared, straining against the icy ground, until finally, after what felt like an eternity, the aircraft came to a halt. Silence followed, heavy, tense, then slowly replaced by the sound of crew breathing, exhausted but alive. "Falcon 29, you did it," Hawk said over the radio, voice almost reverent. Exhaled, allowing herself a small, exhausted smile. She looked at her crew, all wide-eyed but alive. In that moment she realized the impossible had been achieved. Not by luck, not by chance, by precision, training, and unwavering focus. Outside, the F-22s circled protectively, engines glowing in the storm. Inside, allowed herself the first real relief of the day. They had survived. They were alive. And Falcon 29 had become more than a call sign, it had become legend. The engines had cooled to a low rumble, but the storm was far from finished. Outside, the icy wind battered the wings of the C-17, sending flurries of snow across the tarmac. Trent leaned back in her seat for the first time in hours, her muscles aching, her fingers stiff from gripping the yoke. She exhaled deeply, but relief was tempered by caution. The aircraft was intact, yes, but the Arctic environment offered no forgiveness for complacency. "Crew, brace for exit," instructed, her voice firm yet calm. "Keep masks on until fully outside. Wind chill is extreme." In the cargo hold, the team moved carefully, following protocol despite exhaustion. The loadmaster, Sergeant, secured the rear hatch and led the crew toward the stairwell. Every step required attention. Ice coated the steps, and the wind threatened to throw anyone off balance. Followed, her mind still racing. She couldn't stop thinking about the F-22 escort that had guided them here, their precision allowing survival where it might otherwise have been impossible. Outside, the full scale of the landing became apparent. The ice runway was jagged, uneven, and barely wide enough for the C-17. Snow whipped past the fuselage in sheets, carried by gusts strong enough to throw a grown man off his feet. Yet there it sat, colossal and defiant, a steel behemoth that had survived an unforgiving storm. Hawk and Blaze circled above, ensuring no unexpected obstacles threatened the area. Then, as the F-22s peeled off to orbit, a convoy of rescue vehicles approached from the nearby outpost. Emergency crews scrambled toward the aircraft, shouting over the wind, guided her crew carefully to safety, helping secure their harnesses and checking vitals. "Captain, we've got everyone accounted for," Bob said, his face pale but triumphant. "Nobody injured seriously." Allowed herself a small nod, a rare smile breaking through the tension. "Good, that's what matters. Let's get warm and assessed." By the time she climbed into the rescue vehicle herself, word of the emergency landing had already spread through military channels. NORAD logs, radar operators, and flight coordination centers had documented every second of the drama. Analysts and commanders alike were stunned. The C-17 had survived conditions that had grounded even fighter jets in similar storms. Phone buzzed with encrypted messages from her squadron commander. One read simply, "Captain Trent, we knew you were good, we didn't know you were this good. Debrief ASAP. You've just set a new standard." She exhaled, exhaustion and disbelief colliding. For years she had flown quietly, performing her duties without seeking attention. Cargo pilots were rarely the stars of stories. They were the backbone, the silent heroes. Yet today, she had become the center of a narrative no one could ignore. As the aircraft was secured and inspected, was led into a debriefing room. NORAD officials, base commanders, and even the F-22 pilots awaited her arrival. Hawk stood there, arms crossed, a rare, approving smile on his face. "Falcon 2-9, he said simply. "That was some flying. Couldn't have done it better myself." Inclined her head, letting the title resonate. It felt strange, proud, yes, but also heavy. The weight of responsibility she had carried for hours was now amplified by recognition. News soon trickled beyond military channels. Journalists caught wind of the story, captivated by the idea of a cargo pilot coordinating with F-22 fighters to survive a storm that seemed insurmountable. Trent became a symbol, not just of skill, but of composure, leadership, and courage under pressure. But for her, the accolades were secondary. What mattered was her crew, alive and well, and the aircraft, standing like a testament to human skill and determination in the face of chaos. She allowed herself a private smile, thinking of her father's words that had guided her since her first flight. Never underestimate the sky. Today, she hadn't underestimated it. She had conquered it, and in doing so, earned a call sign, a legend, and a story that would be told for years. As snow continued to fall outside, Trent looked at her crew, their tired but grateful faces reflecting the same relief she felt. In that moment, she realized the storm had not just tested her skill, but had revealed her courage, and that courage had carried them all home. Days after the harrowing flight, the Arctic sun barely broke through thick clouds, casting a pale glow over Air Force Base. The storm had passed, leaving a stark, frozen landscape littered with snowdrifts and ice-crusted runways. Inside the base, however, the atmosphere was electric. Trent, once a quiet, unassuming cargo pilot, had become the focus of attention, her actions the subject of whispered awe and official commendations alike. Walked through the hangar toward the debriefing room, each step echoing across the polished floor. She had expected congratulations, perhaps a formal commendation, but the scale of recognition surprised even her. High-ranking officers, radar operators, and even NORAD commanders gathered, their expressions a mixture of respect and disbelief. On a screen behind them, footage from the F-22 escorts replayed, highlighting every critical maneuver that had guided the C-17 to safety. "Captain Trent," said Commander Sarah Monroe, rising from her seat, "we've reviewed every second of your flight. Your actions were exemplary. The precision, the coordination with the F-22s, and your composure under extreme stress saved lives. You've set a new standard for aerial operations." Inclined her head, letting the gravity of the moment sink in. Recognition had never been her goal. She had flown for decades without expecting applause, believing that survival and mission success were their own reward. Yet, as she looked around at the people whose lives she had impacted, she felt a quiet pride. The F-22 pilots, Hawk and Blaze, stood nearby, nodding subtly. Hawk's voice, calm and deliberate, broke the room's tension. "Falcon 29, he said, the old call sign resonating in the air. "Today you showed what true leadership is. Not just flying skill, leadership, calm under pressure, and courage. You're the reason we're all here. Literally." Co-pilot Bob gave a tired grin. "And here I thought cargo pilots didn't get to be heroes." She allowed herself a small laugh, the first since the storm. "Heroes don't have to fly fighters. They just need to do the job right every time." News of the flight had already begun circulating. Military press releases praised the courage and skill demonstrated in extreme conditions. Social media, though not officially sanctioned, buzzed with admiration. Hashtags celebrating Falcon 29, viral posts showing the C-17 in the storm, and stories about the extraordinary coordination between cargo and fighter pilots. Trent had become a symbol of excellence, humility, and bravery, an example to pilots across the Air Force. Later, in the quiet of the officers' lounge, sat with her crew, sharing warm blankets and hot coffee. The adrenaline had faded, leaving exhaustion mixed with relief. "We made it," she said softly, more to herself than anyone else. Sergeant Everblunt nodded. "Yeah, you made us all look good." Smiled faintly. She thought of the storm, the relentless wind, the violent shaking of the aircraft, and the F-22s cutting through the gray as if guiding them by sheer will. That day, she had learned something profound. Leadership wasn't about recognition. It was about trust, precision, and remaining calm when everything else screamed chaos. Months later, stood at the podium for her official commendation ceremony. Medals gleamed in the sunlight, but her eyes scanned the audience for familiar faces, her crew, Hawk, Blaze, and the instructors who had trained her long ago. She accepted the Air Force Commendation Medal with quiet dignity, aware that the accolades were shared with every person who had contributed to the rescue: the radar operators, NORAD, and the F-22 pilots. In her mind, she returned briefly to the cockpit, to the storm, to the moment she had called out Falcon 29 into the void and someone had answered. That call sign was no longer just an exercise tag from training. It had become a legend, whispered among pilots, remembered in logs, and etched into the history of the Air Force. As she stepped down from the podium, felt a sense of closure and purpose. She returned to her aircraft, her crew, and her missions, not for fame or recognition, but because flying was who she was. Yet now, every pilot who looked to the skies could see a symbol of bravery, calm, and skill embodied in Falcon 29. Years later, when new pilots asked about her story during training, instructors would tell it like a legend. Of a cargo pilot who faced a storm that seemed insurmountable, who remained calm when systems failed, and who led her crew to safety, guided by courage, skill, and the quiet authority of a call sign that would never be forgotten. Trent, once just a cargo pilot, had become a hero whose legacy would inspire generations. The Falcon 29 who taught the Air Force what it truly meant to survive, lead, and endure.